Hey ladies, my name is Jenny Chaffetz and I am the host of Sideline Sisters. Are you a busy mom, powerhouse professional, or high-achieving go-getter? This show is for no BS women who want to be inspired to get off the sidelines of their lives. Ever feel like you're playing small or safe or just on autopilot? My guests are relatable women who've gone on a journey, overcome challenges, and lived to share the lessons that we want to hear. These conversations will be funny, sad, scary, wise, encouraging, and most of all, real. So whether you're driving, doing chores, exercising, walking the dog, or just laying on the couch, settle in and enjoy. I want to invite you to take back your power, reignite your passions, and step off the sidelines. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Sideline Sisters podcast. My name is Jenny Chaffetz. I own the company Gentle Coaching, and I am so excited to have you here. Whether it's on a podcast app or on YouTube, this is a really special place for me, and I'm honored to share it with you. So for those of you who celebrate, I want to wish you an early Happy Independence Day. It's really timely that this holiday, Independence Day, a celebration of freedom, liberty, and individual rights, is happening now as this particular episode is airing. Today, I have the privilege of inviting you into my conversation with Liz Hirsh Naftali. Liz is the great aunt of Abigail Mor Edan, a 3-year-old who was held hostage in Gaza for 51 days. Abigail was kidnapped by Hamas terrorists on October 7th, 2023, from her kibbutz, Kfar Azza, after her parents were both murdered in front of her earlier that morning by Hamas terrorists. Since October 7th, Liz has been a fervent advocate for Abigail's release and for all the hostages held by Hamas terrorists. She has embarked on extensive travels, engaging with world leaders, meeting with congressional leaders, and delivering impactful speeches in congressional meetings, private gatherings, and through multiple media outlets like this one today. Even after Abigail's release on November 26th as part of a U.S.-Qatar brokered deal that saw the return of 109 children and women, Liz remains unwavering in her dedication to tirelessly advocate for the hostages who remain in Gaza. Liz is the host and creator of the Capital Coffee Connection podcast, a platform where she invites prominent, diverse leaders to talk about the common thread that binds us all together, our shared experiences, stories, dreams, and the very essence of our heart and humanity, leaving out politics and policy. Liz operates the Hirsh Collective, a commercial real estate firm in Los Angeles. She serves on the U.S. Commission for American Heritage Abroad, the Rand Corp Global Emerging Risks Board, Oakwood School, and ICAR boards in Los Angeles, California. Liz is the mother of 5 amazing children. And you will hear this woman today who has such a powerful and heartbreaking personal story, but you will also hear the voice of a woman who is deeply committed to approaching tragedy, obstacles, and utter horror with love in her heart and a vision for connection and resolution. But before we get into this conversation with Liz, I'm curious, how do you feel right now? Where is your head and heart? Are you focused on tragedy, sorrow, and conflict? Do you get bogged down by current world affairs, tricky family dynamics, and other stuff in your life? How do you go about facing undesirable situations? Do you have tools and practices in place, or do you just kind of tread water each day, occasionally getting sucked under the surface and gasping for air and wishing someone would throw you a life raft? My goal through this show and through what I offer at Gentle Coaching is to give you the support, to give you that sense of life raft. Liz talks in our conversation about working together toward love and joy. And that is what I do at Gentle Coaching. So in the show notes, you will find a link to a free breathwork session. It is a short 14-minute opportunity for you to get into your body and connect with your feelings, your sensations, and do a little processing. If you've never tried breathwork, then this is a quick, easy introduction. And even if you are familiar with the practice, you'll want to take advantage of this gift because it's really easy to incorporate into your day. less than 15 minutes, and you can experience what it's like to be still, go inward, and do a little internal housekeeping. I love to say that's what breath work is. It's like dusting, vacuuming, and tidying up your internal home. When we get busy with life or when things just feel too big and overwhelming, it's scary to actually feel feelings. So we stuff them down, we bottle them, we ignore and pretend that they're not even there. Kind of like that treadmill or Peloton in the bedroom that we just throw clothes and blankets on. It's there no matter how much stuff we pile on top of it. That's like our feelings. No matter how much shopping, drinking, eating, or scrolling we do, the pain is still there. And it's just going to linger, fester, and even grow until we process it. And breath work is a way to do that. This short little session you can do just sitting at your desk, lying in bed, even sitting in your car. And if you are intrigued after doing it, please let me know and I can tell you how to do more of it. You can do it one-on-one with me or in group sessions or even by yourself using the free videos that I have posted in the Sideline Sisters Facebook group. Despite the hell that Liz has endured, which you will hear all about, she manages to see friends and go to Broadway and send love to the universe. And what I'm trying to explain to you is breathwork can help you access that love, joy, and compassion that I promise you is in there, but just covered up with a lot of other stuff right now. So please check the show notes for the link to the free breathwork session. And now let's get into our conversation with Liz Hirsh Naftali. I am so excited for this conversation today, and also, full transparency, a little intimidated, a little nervous because I am joined by an amazing woman today. Liz, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and I'm really happy to be here, and there's no reason to be intimidated. Just two women having a drink together and talking.
Yes, no. So every once in a while, my insecurities come out about what I have accomplished or my big dreams in life, and then I'm sitting across from someone who is just so inspiring. Okay, so I gave the audience a little idea of who you are. It's obviously words on a page, nothing compares to the full picture in front of me. So we're going to get into a lot of different things and we're going to weave it all together because I try to be masterful with my segues and my threads. I pride myself on that. That is where I'm accomplished, I think.
Okay.
But let's see. So you have two monster projects, let's say that take up your time or that you can be that can be attributed to you. So you've got your podcast, Capital Coffee Connection, and this book that you've written on a topic that is hugely significant in your life and the lives of millions of others. And before we get into each of those, I am curious how a woman such as yourself grew up in Los Angeles.
Yes.
You have this passion for politics in a general sense of supporting issues and people that are brave and bold and purposeful. How did that happen? How did you even come to the path of being interested in this?
It's such a good question, and I've thought a lot about it. First I had two parents that were incredibly passionate about doing good things in the world. For them, it was about taking care of, grew up in LA, it was taking care of people in LA. It was for them very important to take care of the Jewish people. Living in LA, around the world, they gave and did a lot for Jews that were living all over, especially in the former Soviet Union, but also supporting Israel. And that for me was like incredibly, one of those things that you didn't have to listen to what they were saying. You just saw what they were doing. And it was in my DNA and in my siblings who are also very much participating in our communities. And also, I think about it like I grew up in a time where my mother, like, she would be late for picking me up at school, and I would just have to sit there without an iPhone and just be resilient and just have to be knowing that she was a little bit late. I think she forgot me once or twice, but my point is that there was nobody sitting there just making sure everything was easy when I was little, and I had a beautiful childhood, so I'm not,
Right?
but it was also just having to like sit there and wait
Yeah.
and not panic and just know that she'll get there. And she came. And then I also think about, like, in my house, we had chores. We weren't just running from class to class. Like, we were helping with the dinner. We were helping with the dishes. When we got a car and we were told we could go to the market, we had to like show the receipt.
Yes.
And I'm just saying it was like a different time. And I think a lot about, I went to work when I was 13. My dad said, "You want to come to work?" And I said, "Great." And I like went on my
Mm.
weekends and on my holidays, and I was answering the phones, and we were in the downtown area, and we had a building called the Cooper Building, and it had discount outlets. And I was literally opening up boxes, helping customers, selling
Mm.
clothes, working with tenants. And this is what I did during my youth. So I think what it is, like, I got to a place as an adult thinking, wow, this is what you're supposed to do, right? And and so I don't know how that contributed to where I am now, but what it did was it gave me a foundation as a young person to go out and get things and go out and do things and not wait to be taken or not to be given things without having to work hard for them. I hope that makes sense.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I completely relate. My mother was mostly a stay-at-home mom. She dabbled in some other businesses, but she was a very busy woman with hobbies, with philanthropy, and I often came home to an empty house, which I had to get to myself because I was not on a bus route. My school said, "You live too close. You're a mile away, you walk." And the number of times I came home to an empty house, not because I was this, poor quote latchkey kid, but my mom was busy. And
And she
it's
knew you could do it. She knew you could do it.
exactly. So it's like, we mentioned before recording the word resilience. It starts then. It starts with coming home to an empty house and like, you're hungry, get your own snack. You have homework to do, get going on it. There's stuff in your way, clean it up.
Yeah. And
So
in our house, it was just be at the dinner table at 6 p.m. You just had to be at dinner, and you didn't get to choose what you wanted. There was a dinner.
I was just going to say, your
There
mom
was
made one, or your father made one meal. There
Right.
were
There
not
was a
options.
meat, there was a vegetable, there was a carb, and there was a drink, and it was juice. And
Yeah.
so again, I have very fond memories of growing up, but it wasn't a free for all. We were expected to show up and do our thing with lots of love and support, but it wasn't we did things on our own, even as a very young child.
So, where in the course of events did you get pinged with this idea for a podcast related to politics, but not one angle or the other, more just about the people, the humans in politics?
So it's a great question. So for me, supporting people and being in political work was always about how do we be representing who the people are in our country, and how do we fight for something that is what democracy is about, which is everybody participating. But then I was understanding that how do you participate if you don't know who your leaders are? And it could be in your same party that you're registered, or you could be in one party and not even know the other people on the other side and
Mm,
just not like them because of what they voted on or what somebody told you about them. And
yeah.
so I started this concept, and I'll be honest, like, it was really started with this understanding of I wanted to get to know people and hear their stories. And I also wanted to know people that weren't my background, maybe not what my political party was, but were just leaders. And what I found was if you spoke to both Democrats, Republicans, and independents, and people that were very different, we talk Dem and Republican, but think about like urban and rural. Think about
Mm,
you are in New Hampshire, I'm in New York, and what somebody in Arkansas is doing right now, or somebody in
right.
Wyoming is doing. Everybody's so different. And I thought this was a way to like show that we are all in this together. And in the end, we may have different stories, but we all had a school teacher that influenced us. We all have our favorite food. We all have a favorite color. And so for me, this podcast was about humanizing our leaders. So I could speak with Steve Scalise, Republican leader Steve Scalise, Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries. And if you heard them, and they were in the last season, The podcast is green, which means you can listen to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast and you don't know what year it is because it's not about a vote. It's not about who we don't like. It's about who these people are. But if you listen to these two men, you wouldn't go, he's a Republican and he's a Democrat. You would just go, these are two leaders that have heart and humanity. They love their kids. They respect and love their wives. And in some cases, like, they were a little afraid of their wives in terms of how they walk dishes. But it's human. And so at the end, this is why for me, this podcast was an important thing to start. And now having done it for now 2 years, there's not a conversation where I do not speak with a leader, Democrat or Republican, and get off and think, wow,
Yeah.
person is inspiring. It's less than 30 minutes. And I'm like, I am inspired. And I try to do more listening than talking. But it is, for me, it's been an incredible learning curve and for a passion, which is how do we talk to each other?
Well, I will tell you, as a consumer of the podcast, I am so grateful because, as you pointed out, we do live in this world where there's labels. And, you watch the news and they're featuring something with a political leader speaking. And of course, under their photo is their name, their state, their party affiliation. And the thing I love about your show is just how you said it, that it's timeless, it's partyless, it's human. And one thing I will point out to the listeners is it was so hilarious when I first learned about you on someone else that I follow on Instagram. And she was the one that mentioned you and your book, which we will get to. So then I immediately click on you. So who's this Liz person? I need to see what she's all about because I'm fascinated by this topic. And then I'm going through all the posts and I see that you interviewed someone I went to college with. Now, Josh Gottheimer probably doesn't remember me, although he did go to a sorority formal with my closest friend. But I see his picture on your Instagram feed. And so obviously, I have to listen to that interview. Now, over the years, I have come to know a little bit about him because I knew, oh, someone I graduated with was in Congress. I knew his party affiliation, but from your interview, I didn't. And that is remarkable that you were just exposing the qualities of this human, the richness, the depth of character without, as you stated, what was his last vote? Who was he supporting? What is he pushing? It was just.
And if you listened, you also heard that some of his very close friends that he works out with are Republicans.
Mm.
And so and he has great respect for them. And so that's the goal, is that we at the end will be able to say we can be different in certain places and vote differently. But we work out together and we raise kids and we all have the same things about raising kids and what
Right.
they should go to or what a neighborhood offers them. And I like it when different leaders will tell you like their state's the best state to raise
I
kids.
was just gonna say, to hear him talk about New Jersey.
If you're going to represent a state, you should love it. And they do.
Yeah. So I applaud you for being able to do a quote political podcast that is really human and good natured.
I appreciate those words. Thank you. And I really hope I hope people will listen more and more to things like my podcast, but others, because what I also know is that, and you know this from like coaching, that people get so wrapped up in 24/7 news and they get so angry and it doesn't matter what side or what issue. And, if 2 days later, it's on to the next thing and 3 days later. And if you could take time to listen to your podcast and to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast and just go, you know what? 30 minutes, 45 minutes of like good people, kind people that are trying to do good in our world. I think that does a lot for the human soul, in terms of like what we leave with and what we share. And as you know, my last question is about joy. And I feel like we need to keep pumping joy in and love in, and not artificially, authentically, because that joy then can spread to others. And we are at a joy deficit right now, at a deficit in how we communicate on screens.
Yeah. So true. So sad. Hey everybody, sorry for the interruption, but I have to tell you about the upcoming gentle coaching workshop called Coping with Challenges. Yeah, we all have coping strategies, but maybe yours are not the most healthy or supportive for your nervous system. If your go to coping mechanism is food, drink, shopping, gambling, scrolling, binging Netflix, then I want to invite you into this free workshop where we will explore other techniques that will be a little more conducive to overall well being, feeling content, serenity, and even better sleep. The workshop is Tuesday, July 15th, 3 p.m. Eastern Time for 1 hour, and you can check the show notes to register. I really hope to see you there. Just a moment ago, you said that the beauty of your podcast is these inspiring conversations that in 30 minutes you can feel inspired by these leaders. And that's exactly how I feel about my show. It might not be 30 minutes. That might have been the original goal. And then I just get into these conversations and we keep talking and talking and talking. And I don't want to cut anything out, but I am so uplifted, inspired, encouraged, educated by the people that come on this show, and that is the thrill. That is the Red Bull that keeps me going. Is, oh, I get to talk to Liz today. Let's go. The time can't get here fast enough.
And what's lovely about podcasts is they're very democratizing. People don't have to pay for it. Right. And they can do it on a walk and a drive or exercise, or just laying around. But it's also, I think podcasts make you sort of feel like you're in the room with the people versus on TV or movies. You feel like when I listen to podcasts, I feel like, I'm kind of not speaking, but I'm in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I've gotten on podcasts with, I've had the privilege of interviewing some people who are more well-known or have a big platform, or I don't want to say household names, but hopefully someday I will have some of those, Reese Witherspoons and Drew Barrymore's on the show, but people who have been really special in my life that I've had the privilege of interviewing. I interviewed my favorite fiction author, and there was just something about having this conversation on the screen that was so level setting and relatable. Like, oh, you're just a human who happens to have your name in big letters on the front of this paperback. It's all good.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, again, we were talking about before recording, is that we all have stories. We all have stuff that is more meaningful than our party affiliation or the color of our hair. And so, in addition to your incredible podcast, you also have this very tragic, traumatic story that the world needs to know about. So let's get into the book.
Okay.
Your story, Abigail's story, is horrific. And there might be people listening who do not know about the chaos, disruption, the gravity of what's going on in the Middle East. So can you please illuminate your particular story in the larger story?
Yeah. So, I'll kind of set the story, and it's interesting because it's been 20 months as we're speaking today since October 7th. But this story could be in 30 or 40 months, or in 5 years or 10 years. We will keep telling the story of October 7th because it was the greatest day of killing and murder in the Jewish state in its history. And it was over 1,200 people were murdered, innocent babies, little babies in their homes, grandparents, people from over 30 nations, 5 religions. And it was an invasion with one goal from a Hamas terrorist organization, another jihadist from Gaza, to come in and kill as many people in Israel as they could. And they also took over 250 people as hostages. And they were babies, children, grandparents, men, women, and they took them from their beds in their pajamas and took them into Gaza. And I start by saying that because that's an overall picture of what happened. But for my family specifically, on that morning on October 7th, I have family that lived on a community called Kfar Azza, which is a kibbutz, a community of people living, and it's beautiful. It's like a natural green oasis with little homes and kids running free and getting to live life, and it was a place with, a neighborhood. The school was there, and everything was there. And that morning, my niece, who lived there with her 3 kids and her husband, was at 6:30 in the morning, in their home. Sirens started to ring throughout the country. Now, where they lived was literally, when those sirens ring, that means missiles are being sent in. And those missiles are coming from Gaza. And they are not like people in the north of the country that have 10 or 5 minutes to go to a safe room. These are people that have seconds, because these missiles are coming from Gaza, which is only a mile away. And so that morning, the missiles started flying at 6:30. I'm in Tel Aviv. I'd come the day before to visit my daughter. I had arrived on Friday night, and it was Saturday morning. It was a holiday called Simchat Torah, and October 7th, 2023. And I'm in my safe room, which is the stairwell at a hotel in Tel Aviv. And in Israel, unfortunately, this has become part of a life, which is there are missiles that come in. And in the recent days and the recent months, they've been coming in from the Houthis, from Yemen, and people are getting siren alerts on their cell phones and through the cities and through the buildings, and they're running to safe rooms. Then they go back after 10 or 20 minutes and they start life again. It's horrible, but it is a fact of life in Israel, and people don't understand in America and around the world that this is literally the existence of people living in Israel. But on October 7th, the sirens didn't stop. The missiles did not stop. Thousands of missiles were flying into Israel, but also thousands of terrorists were breaking into Israel. They were coming by land, by sea, by foot, and by air on paragliders into Israel with one goal: to kill and destroy as many people and as much as they could. So that morning, my niece was putting her 3 children. The sirens started to blare, and she was putting her 3 children in their safe room, which is just a room in their house that had a special door and was sturdier. So if a missile hit their house, they would be safe in this room. All the homes on this community, this kibbutz, Kfar Azza, had them, but they weren't meant for terrorists. They weren't locked. They weren't sealed in a way that somebody from the outside couldn't get in. So as she was putting these kids in the safe room, her husband, who was a photojournalist and was outside taking photos like he had done many times to report to the rest of the country the missiles, the terrorists broke into her home, which was at the corner, at the boundary of the kibbutz closest to Gaza, and murdered her in front of 3 little kids: Abigail 3, Amalia 6, and Michael 9. And after they witnessed the murder of their mother, my niece Madar, they ran outside, and their father, who was coming back and understood this was a terrorist attack. It wasn't a missile only attack, but there were terrorists. He actually took photos before this of the people, the terrorists, the jihadists flying in on paragliders. So he had documented this before he went back, and then he goes back, he picks up Abigail, and he and the 2 other children, they run, and then he is murdered. He is gunned down by the terrorists. He falls onto Abigail, the 3-year-old, and then Michael and Amalia, 6 and 9. They run home. They lock themselves in a closet in their safe room. And thinking about, for your listeners, that their mother, Smadar, is lying there.
Yeah.
And so that was the beginning of, for me, being able to tell people what happened on October 7th. And I was in a hotel room learning this, not from the news, but learning this from our family, because Michael and Amalia were with cell phones quietly in a closet telling people what was happening and what they did. And they were there for 14 hours alone. Now, across from this community, my other niece and her husband and 3 kids, they survived in silence for 28 hours in their safe room. They were just fortunate that the terrorists didn't get into their safe room, but they were in their home and they were everywhere around.
How did you find out that Abigail was taken?
So Abigail, at that moment, Michael and Amalia believed that she had been killed because she was in her father's arms. So when they ran back, it's not that they left Abigail,
Sure.
saw that their father had been murdered and Abigail was under him.
Yeah.
And they ran home and they locked themselves in this closet. What we learned a few days later, now keep in mind that on this community, this kibbutz, there were over 300 terrorists. This is a community that has 700-ish people, many of them children, all locked in their safe rooms. There's over 300 men, jihadists, many of them dressed in Israeli Defense Force fatigue, so they could psychologically manipulate the minds of people that did see them to think they were Israelis when they were jihadists. They are all over this kibbutz. They are coming with so much militia and grenades and RPGs, and just with one goal, to get as many and murder as many as possible. So as this is all happening, it took the IDF that did not arrive for hours. The Israeli Defense Force was caught off guard. They did not come to save any of these people. These incredible Israelis, reservists that came from all over the country, put on their uniforms, and reservists are people that are no longer conscripted, but that are, any age above, and they came to fight to support these people on their own. They took their weaponry, they got in their cars, and they showed up at this kibbutz and other communities, and many of them lost their lives. But they did one thing, which was, how can we save our people? Which gives me still the chills when I think about this, as the Israeli people taking care of the Israeli people.
Mm-hmm.
And on this day, Michael and Amalia were there, and this is all we knew. But after the IDF came, after they started to clear this kibbutz of many corpses and many people that were murdered, Abigail was nowhere to be found. This little 3-year-old was not there. What we also learned was that Abigail had actually survived. She had crawled out from under her father's body and gone to a home where nobody was there. And then she went to another home. And by a miracle, the husband, the father, who was her dad's best friend, a man named Avichai Brodich, was actually going out to protect the kibbutz. He opened the door and there was little Abigail. Now, if he hadn't opened the door, she would have been left alone. It was a miracle. And he basically took her and put her with his wife and 3 kids. And then he went out to protect the kibbutz because he was part of their security patrol.
Mm-hmm.
He was injured and did not come back, but he then was medevaced out. But a few days later, what he could do was confirm that Abigail had indeed arrived at his home and was put in the safe room with his wife and 3 kids. And then another person on the kibbutz saw his wife and 3 kids being marched off by Hamas terrorists. Nobody could say for sure that Abigail was there, but they saw her. They saw his wife Hagar and their 3 kids being taken. So we started to put things together and then validated, because there was some clipping and film from the kibbutz that showed Abigail was with them.
Oh,
I know.
God.
It's
Yeah.
when I tell the story, and Abigail was released after 51 days, but when I hear this story in my head or share it, I still get the chills, and I can't believe that this child survived everything. And still knowing that her parents, my niece and her husband, were 2 of 1,200 people murdered that day.
And the other 2 children,
After
siblings,
14 hours, they were taken out by special forces. There was still fighting going on, but they were taken out. And it's another story of this beautiful woman named Tamar, who spent 12 hours on the phone with them. She works for a group called United Hatzelet, which basically does emergency security, healthcare, first aid in Israel. It's a volunteer program, and they were connected. And she spent 12 hours talking to Michael and Amalia. It's another story, but locked in this closet in their safe room, and gave them, I said, she saved their souls. She did not know them, but she got to know them, and they got to know her. They sent selfies. But they had to be quiet also because there were terrorists all around. But when they finally were released after 12 hours, I think about how this woman gave them the ability to make it through these 12 hours alone, with fighting going on. They were smelling smoke. Yeah. She was talking to other relatives on the kibbutz and sharing with them. And I just think about what they went through. And now these 3 children are all living with my niece and her husband and their 3 kids who survived this horror terror attack. And every day for them is putting their feet forward and making as best a life they can for three children and who don't have their biological parents, but now are part of this incredibly beautiful blended family.
I spent a lot of time on this show talking about big T, little t trauma and validating the little t traumas that every one of us walking around has at one point or another endured. The schoolyard bullying, or the uh, coming from a big family and being told to be quiet because your siblings are talking, or just the nasty teacher who embarrassed you. It's easy for me to spend all that time talking about those things and not forget, but maybe not spend enough time on the legit big T trauma, because a lot of us don't know the big T. We're consumed and shaped by the little t, which is just as valid. But then to pause and think of this story and know that those six children that you mentioned
Oh,
and all the others are forever changed from that day.
yeah.
That no matter how wonderful and comforting that blended family is, that day is there, just scarred in their DNA.
Yeah. And look, I'll bring out the picture to all these children in this country still running to safe rooms and still having military, missiles coming in. But so many people have therapists. There's not enough therapists. And the
Mhm.
therapists, there's not enough therapists. So when we talk about trauma, and I also share this very often, which is until all the hostages are home, and as we speak, there are still 55 people that are being held and 20 young men who are alive. This is a trauma that does not even have an ability to, I say for our family, the time we could move forward was the moment Abigail came back. But the rest of the families and the country, and I believe for most people with a human spirit and
Mhm.
humanity, until all these hostages, these people come home to their family, the living ones to be reunited, but also the deceased that were murdered and taken as hostages, which is a disgusting concept, but they were, until they're back and they can be respectfully and properly buried in a way that honors them. We all have a trauma. But
Mhm.
the other thing that I say for Americans, and this is the hardest part, which is we have so many things happening that we also, as people, become desensitized. And it's like, okay, the latest thing, the latest thing. And it's also a way not to have to deal with sometimes the trauma. But what I tell people, and I travel the country and I travel the world, is like acknowledging this trauma and saying to people, Jewish and not Jewish, like, this is something we all have to acknowledge. Because if we don't, then we also allow for it to happen again.
Mhm.
And, terror is based on people, how they respond. And for me, it's like terror that took place in Israel, terror that takes place anywhere is something we all must fight. And there's not one place that it's okay and one place that it's not, but it's how we then respond. And for myself, and I believe what you do is we respond by speaking up, talking about it, dealing with it. And unfortunately, this story will be a story that I will keep telling. And I don't say unfortunately, I'm just saying like it's not what I want to wake up and do, but it's what I know we need to do, which is
Yeah.
keep telling the story. Because I've told the story hundreds of times, but your listeners, for many, it will be the first time hearing it.
Right.
And I hope that they bear witness and they share this story. And that is why I wrote the book, Saving Abigail, because what I understood is that we need to talk again, not just with Jewish people that think it was a Jewish terror attack, because it was
Right.
humanitarian crisis. These people murdered people, young men from Africa who had shown up in Israel to work on farms and learn. They murdered people from Nepal, from the Philippines, Buddhists. They murdered Bedouins and Arab Israelis, Muslims. They didn't care. People from over 30 nations, they did not care. They intended to just kill as many people as they could. And so for me, like part of what I'm here to talk about is, yeah, Abigail's story, but it talks from a place of a true story that happened to a little 3-year-old and to her family. But it's a story that I want people to know so that they can say it's not okay for an Abigail, but it's also not okay for our families. It's not okay for any family.
Pardon the interruption, but I have to tell you about my absolute favorite place on planet Earth. It's called Canyon Ranch. Have you ever heard of it? It is a wellness resort, and there are several locations in the United States. I have been to the one in the Berkshires of Massachusetts, and I'm telling you about it so that you can enjoy 10% off this spectacular place. Everything from the food, the staff, the facilities, the workshops, the exercise classes, the overall vibe, it's first class. So I hope you will check it out. You can book online or over the phone using code SIDELINE to save 10%. And now let's get back to the show. I'm so glad you pointed out the variety of population impacted, because I do think the majority of people believe it was a Jewish experience and or Jewish assault, and not a human, a people assault. And so I thank you for pointing that out. I think that gets lost in the story. So how do you grow and maintain hope amid all of this nightmare?
You know, I'll be honest, like in the beginning, when Abigail, when I got back to America and I started telling the story of the murder of my family, and then learning Abigail was a hostage, it gave me something to fight for. And I know that sounds a little weird, but like all of a sudden I was like, okay, Abigail's alive and we're going to get her home. And, you know, in the beginning, we thought, oh, they're going to send these children back. They kidnapped over 35 children under the age of 18. These are just kidnapped children. These isn't the children they left in, like Michael and Amalia in a closet, or two infants across this community that were left with their parents murdered, and two little infants they left crying for 12 hours. I mean, this was just so horrific. You thought, okay, children, how are we going to get these children back? But what I learned was that they weren't releasing them. There wasn't going to be a deal. Prime Minister Netanyahu didn't want a deal. Hamas didn't really have a deal. And what we needed to do was to get these people home. So that gave me something to do. And, you know, you talk about like a purpose. And in my life, I'd always been on the side of like, let me help somebody. But I woke up on October 7th and I needed help. And what I understood was I had to show my own vulnerability and allow for people to help and not be, there was no pride. And so I showed up in Capitol Hill about a week and 2 days later, 9 days later, after October 7th, starting to tell Democrats, Republicans, anyone who would listen, the story of Abigail and the story of all the hostages. And I took this picture of Abigail, which is the cover of the book, and I showed that this picture was the face of a child who was a hostage, who was stolen, and what happened to her parents and where her sister and brother were. And at this point, I was just trying to make a hostage real. And then I took another picture, which was the one of the 250. And it was that mosaic that people remembered seeing with little faces. And these were faces of children and grandparents and people from all different walks of life and from different countries, and just showing that these were real people. And so for me, it was about getting that message out. And then Abigail was released after 51 days. Fast forward, there was a deal at the end of November, and Abigail and the women and children were released. But there were still so many people, over 150, that were still being held. And what I knew, and I think you would do this, and what people would do is like, you don't say, okay, Abigail's home. You're like, okay, Abigail's home, and now we have to get everyone else home so they can have this closure and they can have this finish. And sadly, we're here 20 months later. And so what I've had to learn to do, and I share this like as a woman, is like balance between this fight that I'm still very much in, because I am very passionate about making sure these 20 young men who are alive come home alive, but that all of these hostages be released. And I can say this, whether people like or don't like, that we stop this fighting. And that the little children like Abigail in Israel, children in Gaza, but children in the region, we do not just keep having a war. Now, it's a very simple, what I'm saying sounds like simple, and I know that I'm not going to solve the world issues right now. But if we don't start identifying and discussing this from a perspective of why I'm in this, for a child like Abigail, my niece, and her brothers, and all these 5 other children that are now so closely connected to my story, then you say, wait, what are you doing? We don't got this. We have to keep being in the fight. But then I still need to take walks. I still need to hang out with friends. I went to see a Broadway show last night. And
Mm.
like it isn't easy to go and see a Broadway show as much as we want to. It's like it's that a little bit of a guilt of like going and having a good time when I know these families who are still suffering and their loved ones are still suffering.
Mhm.
But I'm trying to find a balance, and it comes to doing yoga. It comes to having this conversation with you. And so for me, and I say this because I know there are women listening, it's like we have to fight for what we have to fight for. But if we don't take care of ourselves, and you know this, no one takes care of us. We need to take care of ourselves to be the best we can, to give the love and the attention to others. And so I hope I answered that question well.
Ah, yes, above and beyond. It's, I feel like I just heard someone say that same underlying message of there is suffering. There is suffering. And if I continue to abuse myself or put myself in the suffering too, what's the point? How is that helpful if I choose to curl up in fetal position in the corner and suffer with my brethren? Now no one's working for a greater cause.
Yeah, and also, one of the things that a evangelical woman named Penny Nance, who I've worked with from the very beginning, she's been there, and we could talk, and we sometimes talk about like we have many things we don't agree on. But one thing that Penny Nance and I agree on is that we have to bring home these hostages, we have to fight anti-Semitism, we have to fight hate, but we also have to be like respectful. And when I'm in DC and I can have a meal with her or a coffee, it's really such a pleasure and such an honor. And I consider her a friend. But one of the things that she talked to me about, and she's a very, very devout Christian woman, was that from this experience, she had hate in her heart because she knew what these terrorists did and what their intent was, which was to murder children. And I understood from her that that was something that brought hate to her heart. But she said something to me. She said, "But Liz, you look at this with love in your heart." And it wasn't a sign of one is bad or one is not, but it was the way I look at this. And my family was destroyed. Abigail, for the rest of her life, and her brothers and sisters, like you said earlier, are going to be with a big T. We're going to do everything we can. My niece, Lerone, lost her best friend and her little sister. My sister-in-law lost her daughter. I mean, we could go on. But I also know that if we don't come to this with a fact, if we don't come to this with love, we will continue to make the same mistake. And your children and my children and Abigail and all these kids in years to come will be doing the same work. So I say we have to do the work now. And there is hate. There's a lot of hate in the world. But for me, it's about authentically what love can we bring to this and what love and connection can we bring. And I think for me, that is overriding the message and is what love can we find and what love can we share.
With that in mind, then, in speaking to this audience of predominantly midlife women who've experienced life and had the ups and downs so far, what message can you give to help them find the love, see through the lens of love?
Wow, I think that midlife women are incredible. First, we're all taking better care of ourselves. We all we all understand that we have so much more to keep doing. In my mother's generation, when you were in your midlife, you kind of were like, okay, I'm going to slow down. But the women I know, they're just like getting going. And I think that that's incredible. And I think that it's this balance between having the energy. The kids are growing up. They don't need you in the same way. They still need us, by the way. I know that. So people aren't going to like think I got this deal and my kids don't still want mommy.
No
But
mother of five would ever
yeah,
doubt you.
But I say to my kids, you know what? If you need me, I am always here. But I'm going to go live my life, and I have a lot I want to go and do. But I think we have this in knowledge, this experience of living, of raising kids, of being married, not being married, divorcing, dating, whatever it is we're in. But we are all in this place where we can make a difference. And one of the things that I talk to with students and I speak with anyone, the place I end is always about hope. But I always like, it's not a hope like, oh, I just hope something will happen. It's really a belief in hope. But to believe in hope, you got to go fight for it. You got to go make it happen. But you have to have hope on your shoulder, because if not, it's hard work and you might be discouraged. But I think that women in their middle years, which to me are like their kick-ass, let's get going years, are really important. So like my only advice is go find what you're passionate about and go fight for it and go do it. And in my case, like I started this passion project, the Capital Coffee Connection podcast, because for me that was really important to talk and be connected and learn and listen. I talk a lot today, but I do a lot of listening. But then October 7th happened, and it wasn't anything I wanted or anything that today I wish I wasn't even speaking about it because it didn't happen, but it did. So we also are thrown things, and it's how we're going to take them. Do you fight? Do you flight? For me, it was I'm going to stay in this fight, and it's changed who I am. But I've also looked and I've said, I also need support and help from others. I can't do it alone. So if I could give some advice, is like know who you are, know your why, know your how, believe in yourself. And even when you don't puff up, believe in yourself and go for it. We can make a huge difference. But what I've also learned is like it's little ripples, it's little stones, but they come together. And if more and more people, and especially women, are out there showing their heart and their humanity and their love, we can make a lot of things happen in this country and make a lot of things happen just in our own communities.
Liz, I'm so sad to say goodbye to you and finish this conversation, but before we do, please tell everyone where they can get everything, get a glimpse of everything that you have to offer.
So first, thank you for having me and for having this platform. I look forward to continuing to see where we can partner because we are all sisters. So thank you.
Yes.
Um, so for myself, one of the things that I did was I started the Capital Coffee Connection podcast, and I had it on social media, and I still do on all the places, Instagram and YouTube. And a lot of the viewing can be seen and listened to on YouTube and on Podbean, et cetera. But for me, that's like an important place for people who really care about wanting to know about the heart and humanity of our leaders, the diverse leaders. Got 30 minutes once a week. It's better. It's like a cup of coffee. It just gets you going and it's really positive. And then the work I'm doing with Saving Abigail, the book, which you can buy on Amazon. It's also as a Kindle. It's also as an audio. You can speed up my voice and hear it quickly. But the thing is that it's really an important story for people that want to know the truth of October 7th. And it's
Yeah.
a love story to our country of America, of bipartisanship in terms of getting the hostages home. But it's also just about resilience. You and I spoke of resilience. It's about the resilience of this 3-year-old running through a community with terrorists everywhere and finding safety, surviving 51 days in silence and in darkness, starving. Resilience of the woman Hagar who took care of her. I mean, we could go on, but it's about the resilience that we all can find in ourselves. And look, you can go on Instagram. And then I had to start my own Instagram, which I'm just going to share with you quickly. Like, I did not want my own Instagram. I wanted to be like Capital Coffee, the Saving Abigail, and these projects that are really important to me. And then some people just said, like, Liz, you need to bring them together. And you and I spoke a little bit about this is who you are, and these are two very strong lanes in your life, but they do intersect in this heart and humanity. And
Yes.
me, the leadership in America, and I hope in the world, will focus more if I can just put a little ripple in the waves of heart and humanity, which we need. We need in the Middle East right now, we need in America, we need everywhere. But then the heart and humanity to like make sure that we focus on bringing home all of our loved ones that we make sure that we stand against terror, we stand against murder, we stand against rape. Doesn't matter if they are Jewish, it doesn't matter what religion or where they are, that we bring heart and humanity, and that we look at our leaders that have failed us, people who have failed us, to look at the heart and humanity of what happened to the people in Israel on October 7th. And so for me, it's like this clarion call of like bringing it together, telling the truth, telling heart and humanity, resilience, and then hope. So I hope at the end, if you're bored, you can go on Liz Hirsh Naftali on Instagram and check it out. And really just trying to be there and being one other person in the fight for humanity. And I am honored and humbled to be able to speak to you today. And I find that no matter where I speak and with whomever I speak with, that we all have so much more in common, and we have a common need to be together. And that's really what I plan to be doing. And thank you for giving me that opportunity. And I loved being on your podcast.
Well, I am equally as honored and humbled that you made the time to be here and share your personal tragedy and your message of beauty for the world. It's something we all can grasp and infuse into our lives. So I'm eternally grateful to you. And on that note, I want to invite you to raise your glass as we say cheers to hope, heart, humanity, and love.
I love it. Thank you so much.
They were your words, so
I know.
thank you for sharing them.
Thank you.
Liz, I wish you nothing but success and prosperity and growth with this vision and mission that you're working toward. And anything I can do to help you along, please let me know.
Thank you.
Wow. I want to extend a big, beautiful bouquet of gratitude to Liz Hirsh Naftali for sharing Abigail's story, her family's story, and this message of hope and heart to the world so that we can all heal, repair, and collaborate for greater good. Now let me get into Liz's notes from the sidelines. Number 1, it's important for kids to see their parents doing good in the world. Number 2, it is also important for kids to learn to take care of themselves and step up. One way is by doing chores. Number 3, a powerful message that came from her childhood was not waiting to be taken care of or given anything, but rather going out and doing it for herself. Number 4, people get so worked up about politics and the news, and it can create an experience of negativity. Whereas listening to inspiring podcasts like the Capital Coffee Connection and Sideline Sisters helps us see things differently and replenish the joy deficit. Number 5, October 7th, 2023 will forever be remembered as the greatest day of killing in the Jewish state of Israel. There was so much tragedy on that day, and we are blessed that Liz has had the courage to tell her family's story as it was impacted that day. Number 6, for those of you who do not already know this, regular daily life in Israel includes siren alerts, missiles, and going into safe rooms. Just sit with that for a moment and take that in, especially as we remind ourselves of American Independence Day. Number 7, there is so much trauma in the world, especially as a result of October 7th. We all have it, whether we were there, whether our families were directly affected, or whether we are just humans in the world. Number 8, we must remember that 10/7 was a humanitarian crisis, not a Jewish attack. Number 9, show vulnerability without pride and let people help you. Number 10, there is a place of balance between fighting the fight and taking care of ourselves. Yes, we need to fight for the things we need to fight for, and we need to take care of ourselves, fill our cups, so that we can go out there and fight that fight. Number 11, how can we bring love into the issue we're fighting? How can we come from a place of love instead of hate, even if the situation is horrific? Number 12, believe in hope and go make it happen. Number 13, go find your passion and go do it. Number 14, we can all find our own resilience. And number 15, we need heart and humanity everywhere, regardless of politics, race, religion, or any other belief. So once again, Liz, thank you for bearing your soul, telling this gut-wrenching story, and having the courage and love to go forward and work toward your mission in such a purposeful way. So as a reminder for all of you who want to get to know Liz better, check out her social media and her podcast, and please go get her book, Saving Abigail, and tell your friends to do the same. I want to thank you for tuning in and ask that you share this episode with everyone you know. Jews, non-Jews, atheists, agnostic, humans. Let them all hear Liz's story. Because as she said, it's in speaking the stories and telling the truth that we make sure the world does not forget. I look forward to seeing you all right back here next week for my conversation with Nicole Foster. She is a powerhouse, busy, purpose-driven mom who developed not one, but 2 businesses from personal, impactful experiences. She is a model for all of us of what it looks like to be empowered, confident, and unwavering in self-belief. Have a beautiful week. Cheers to you.